Hi guys, today we're going to talk about the concept of the state as well as theories regarding the origin of the state, or that is, how did people come to form governments? So let's first talk about the definition of a state. And I don't want you to be confused with the 50 states of the United States, but rather as the state as its own entity. So a state is a body of people living in a defined territory, organized within a government that can make or enforce laws. The term state is a legal term, and some synonyms or very similar terms to state are the terms nation and country. So a lot of times people will use these three terms somewhat interchangeably, although they do have some slightly different meanings. The concept of the state really focuses on the country as a legal body. Okay, so let's talk about the things that must be present to be classified as a state. So in order for a state to exist, it needs to meet certain criteria. First, it needs to have population, meaning people need to live there. There's no minimum amount of people that need to live there, but the land has to be inhabited. So if you have a solitary island in the middle of the ocean with no people, you can't all of a sudden declare that a state and name it, because it does not meet the requirement of having actual population. All right, in addition to population, the state also needs to have territory or land with known recognized borders. Okay, so if you think about all of those political maps you see where the boundaries of the states are drawn, we can draw those boundaries because other states recognize those boundaries and they are legitimate boundaries. In addition to those two things, there also needs to be a government. There needs to be a functioning and legitimate government. And the government is necessary to prevent the state of nature, which we'll discuss later. The final requirement for a state to be classified as a state is that it needs to have sovereignty, meaning that it has authority and does not answer to a higher government. So if a country is sovereign, that means that they basically answer to their own higher law. So if they have a constitution, that might be its highest law, but they aren't ultimately required to answer to any higher government. So with the idea of sovereignty, we can now see why our 50 states are not states by this definition, because they meet the first three criteria of population, territory, and government. There are people living within the boundaries of our 50 states, and they have recognized boundaries, and there are state and local governments, but they're not ultimately sovereign, because ultimate sovereignty lies with the federal government, and their rules and laws are supreme to those of state governments. All right, so we're going to talk now about why did people come to form government in the first place. So the question is, why did people form government? And this is a question that philosophers have pondered for a long time. And as far back as Aristotle, philosophers have noted that government has always existed. But why and how? And there are a few different theories that have been created to attempt to answer this question. And these are the theories on the origins of the state. First theory we're going to discuss is called force theory. And this theory states that government was formed when a strong individual or a strong group of individuals seized control and imposed their will on a body of people. So when they did this, they made them submit to their authority, and they created a government, or they created a state. So if you want to think about the force theory, you can think, that there's there's a big bully, so to speak, and not necessarily, they don't necessarily have to be the most physically strong, but maybe they are more intelligent than the others, or they have better wits, or they're clever. And through the use of their force, they were able to seize control of a group of people and make them submit to their government. And so this theory maintains that government was forced on people. The next theory we're going to talk about is evolutionary theory. And this theory maintains that government emerged from the traditional family structure. That is, like many families, there's a head of a household, okay? And you have this, within a family, you have the ultimate authority figure, and that person runs things, okay? So you have this family structure on a small scale, and as the population in an area grew, there was an expansion into groups of related families, and that structure of having the authority figure expanded into this group of related families, and then these related families then spread into a clan and then a tribe. And once the tribe was in place, this original family structure with an authority figure created a government with someone at the head of that government. All right, so we're going to talk about divine right theory now. The divine right theory argued that God created the state. So the state was a creation of God, and that God put into place the leaders of the states to serve as the heads of government. And so, therefore, those who rule do so because it's their God-given right to be ruler and to exercise power and authority. So, under this theory, basically a ruler would believe that they were in charge, or they had the authority because it was God's will. And this idea presents some problems, especially when we get to the Enlightenment, and we start talking about things like natural rights. So the problem with the divine right theory is, if you're a citizen who prescribes to this theory, what happens if you believe your government to be corrupt? It's really hard to question the actions of government when you believe their power came from God ultimately. Likewise, if you're a ruler, it almost leads to a sort of sense of entitlement, or it's very easy to become a tyrannical government if you believe that your power was willed by God and that it's your God-given right to rule. Basically, with divine right theory, it becomes really hard to kind of see how the government might be answerable to people. And as I said, this idea began to be questioned during the Enlightenment, which led to the final theory, and it's a good one. And this theory is the one that the United States is based on, and it's called social contract theory. Okay, social contract theory starts with the idea that prior to government, people lived in a state of nature. And in the state of nature, life was chaotic and violent. And there was no protection, and the strong and intelligent dominated others. So people took what they wanted by force. So there was no higher law, and there was no authority that could protect you from aggressors. There was no one who could protect you or your property from people who would just take it by force. And there was no one to call as an authority figure. In present day, if you have your car and it's stolen, you call the police, because the police have authority based on the government. In the state of nature, there would be no way to enforce this idea of property ownership. And in the state of nature, people were insecure and they feared a violent death. And another component of the state of nature that's really important, and this is one of the components that's more positive, is that in the state of nature, you had ultimate freedom and liberty. You were free to do whatever you wanted, and there were no laws, and there was nothing stopping you from doing whatever it is that you wanted. Okay, so according to the social contract theory, you have this ultimate liberty, but then at the same time you have a fear of violent death. And so what happens is people voluntarily give up some of their freedom in order to form a government, and that government will then protect people from aggressors, and they will protect them and provide security so that they're not living in constant fear. So the social contract theory maintains that government was created through a voluntary compact. That is, people voluntarily agreed to give up some of their freedom in order to form a government. And there are a number of notable philosophers that prescribe to this theory, including John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. And as I mentioned, this theory is paramount to the founding of the United States. All right, so those are the theories of government and the characteristics of the state. Which theory do you find most compelling?